Welcome to the Rich Equation Podcast. Rich Equation Podcast. Are you ready to discover how to live rich today and not wait for retirement? If you're tired of struggling and want to live your best life now, you're in the right place. Outdated principles will no longer work in today's environment. It's time for a new approach. Your host, Ashish will help you discover methods to live the new American dream. It's time to start living the good life on your own terms and experience a new way to live. Rich. Now, here's your host, Ashish Nathu.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Rich Equation Podcast. Today I have my really good friend, Gaurav Valani. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
I'm super excited for this. So just to give everybody a quick introduction, Gaurav actually built and ran a pretty large recruiting firm and then had an exit. And I'll let you give a little bit of background in the context of what we talk about today. So had an exit from one of his businesses and has, in the last 4 or 5 years, completely pivoted into being online, but really focusing on adding value to people. And as he's searched for his own rich equation and finding fulfillment, is now helping in career advancement and coaching for employees to find where they belong in the world. And I think it's really cool that we met about half a year ago or so. Maybe it's shorter than that, but instantly hit it off, and I was completely just blown away about how he's taken his skill set and built this really amazing value proposition for his business and his clients, and he just gets so jazzed about it. So welcome to the show, my friend.
Dude, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
This is so good. So the first question we ask every new guest is, what does rich mean to you?
That is a good question. So rich and success to me are kind of the same thing. And the way I define success, so I basically look at life as a series of projects, right? Where we go to school or schooling, a project. Who we date or marry or whatever, project. Kid, project. Work is a project, right? So if by that definition, I view success or being, like rich as being able to pick and choose the projects that you want to work on. So if you can get to the point where you've successfully are able to work on the projects you want to work on, then I define that as being rich.
So meaning that you have choice and flexibility to spend the time you need on certain things that you want to spend time on? Is that what you mean?
Right. Freedom, right? The freedom to pick and choose the things that you want to spend your time on is how I would define rich or successful.
So how have you done that?
It took a long time. There was a long period of time where, and I think this is part of the equation, and you could tell me if I'm wrong here, but I think there is a certain period of time where you have to do things you may not want to do, right? So for me, like in my career, I did not have the most idealistic career when I started out after college. So I bounced around a lot. My first job out of school was selling yellow page ads. That obviously, this was 2006 when the internet was like very much a thing. So clearly that job did not last. Then I went on to do some software sales, wasn't good at it. Then I finally moved into recruiting, and even within the recruiting industry, I bounced around a lot. Took a long time until I felt like I was getting better at it, and paid my dues. And then I started a company with a bunch of other people. And even within like the first it took us 17 months to turn a profit. And so day in, day out, doing all the things that I didn't enjoy doing, or, I was sharpening the what's it called? The axe at that time. And eventually things finally turned around. That company gave me an exit. And then I was able to, from there on out, I was able to pick and choose what I wanted to do. But I wonder if that's sort of the equation for everyone, right? You have to pay your dues.
Yeah, well, before we talk about your pivot, actually, what I just picked up from that, and I say this all the time, that, you got to do what you have to do in order to do what you want to do. Right. And I think people, you just said 2004? So almost 2006, almost maybe 10 years of grinding in many, many things to try to figure out what you wanted or what was good or what you were good at. Right. I think that's right. People can be really impatient when it comes to finding like what's their niche. Right.
Mm-hmm. I think so. And especially like nowadays, right? Where if you go on TikTok today, you're going to see video after video after video of someone saying, here's like 8 ways I made $1 million in the last 30 days, or here's my 40,000 streams of income that bring me like over millions of dollars, and I wonder if that puts a lot of pressure on people. I'm so glad growing up I didn't have TikTok, because I barely had the patience to stick it through with staffing. And I imagine the FOMO that comes with like seeing other people crushing it, would that have like derailed me in some way, or,
Oh man, totally. You're totally right. Like it makes you anxious.
It does.
And it's not real. It's all marketing, right? All these people are fake, but there's still this this perception that everyone has figured it out. We're both in our bedrooms over here, like and so real success is not what it looks like on TikTok. I guess 2 quick questions. Like, what advice do you have to people that are in that position or in that mindset? And then I want to really dig into sort of how you took from your exit, and then what questions were you asking yourself, and what phase were you in your life, and the skill sets you just mentioned, is to then go to the place where you're at right now.
Yeah, that's a good point. So from advice, this is very cookie cutter advice, but it's so true. And I've had tons of people tell me this earlier on. Stay patient. You like stay freaking patient. And enjoy the grind, right? Like
enjoy the grind.
I'm actually really happy that I had to go through it now, because it prepared me for all these things that I wouldn't be able to deal with today. That's one thing. And then the other thing is raising your standards. There's a lot of people who say, I want this, I want that, I want this, I want that. And you don't get something just because you want something. You get something because you raise your standards, right? And that applies to everything. The people you hang out with, the information you choose to consume, how you spend your time, what you work on, taking care of your health, your body, your mind, right? You got to raise your standards, because it just that has a compound effect. And it at some point, if you do that day in, day out for years, it's something pops, and all of a sudden you have like this really beautiful life.
Oh my God, that was so good. So how did you get here? Tell me about that journey, and what really, and you've told me this before, but tell the audience sort of, what questions were you asking yourself, and what triggered you to really build the business you have now, and how it feeds you?
Sure. Okay. So one piece of advice I got. So when I was going through a really bad, horrible period in my career where I couldn't hang on to a job, I wasn't feeling like I was there, quote unquote. And then I decided, well, let me just go and try to build this staffing company. Even though I had no prior entrepreneurship experience, I wasn't even that good of a recruiter to begin with, right? And at that point, I'll just disclose all this stuff because I don't really care. But at that point in 2012, I hadn't made more than $54,000 in my life. And I was like 28 or 29. And I was scared. My mentor at the time said, okay, what's the worst case scenario if you start this business and fail? And I said, well, I guess I'll go back to being a recruiter. And he said, okay, great. So what is it like living your worst case scenario? That was
so good.
Mind bomb number one. I was like, okay, that's right. I guess I should just go for it. And then once we started the business, as I told you, it took us like 17 months to turn a profit. We had lost close to $750,000, a little more than that at that point. And I was almost going to quit then. And same mentor said, I went to him and I was like, dude, I don't have this, I don't have that. This is not working. This is not there. And he told me, he's like, it just seems like all you're doing is focusing on the lack of this, lack of that, whatever. He's like, but what you're not focusing on is what you do have that can actually help someone. So I was focusing on how come I don't have something versus like, what can I give to the world that can actually help them? And it's a very subtle thing, but it made sense because at that point I did know how to help people, write resumes, interview better, negotiate better, map out their career better. I knew all those things. So I was like, let me just, instead of trying to focus on closing sales, let me just focus on like every single day, how many people can I actually help per day, right? Improve their careers and see what happens from that because I had nothing to lose. This is a really long story, so I'm going to shorten it, but it took me, I also ended up getting, I stole Elon Musk's email address in this process.
This is a good story. You should tell the story. Make it quick, but yes, you should tell the story.
All right. So I was like super down and out, sitting next to a buddy of mine at a coffee shop right after I had this talk with my mentor. And he worked at SpaceX. He got up to go to the bathroom. I took his laptop, stole Elon Musk's email address from his laptop, didn't tell him, went home, emailed Elon Musk. That night, in that email, that night I wrote like, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm trying to make it. I know you've tried to make it. I would love to see if I could kind of have your company utilize my staffing services, whatever. I promise I won't rip you off because a lot of staffing agencies rip people off. All this stuff, right? Laid it out there for him, just said, hopefully he responds. And back then on Microsoft Outlook, this is 2012 or 2013, sorry, you could see when someone read your email. I don't know if they have that now, but it was a read receipt. And he read it 3 days later. And I thought, best day of my life, he's going to respond. Didn't respond. I sent a follow-up 2 days later. See that he reads it. Didn't respond. This goes on for 76 emails, FYI. I followed up with them 76 times because in my mind, I was like, I have nothing to lose. And until he literally tells me to stop, I'm just going to keep going. And the 77th email, he forwards it to his director of HR. And he says, I could see what he says because the director of HR responds on that thread. And he's like, talk to this guy. He doesn't seem to go away. So I end up meeting with the director of HR. I convinced him to let us use or to have them use us as their staffing provider, one of their staffing providers. And I basically asked him if I could meet with Elon Musk. And he was like, looks at me like as if I'm the dumbest person in the world. And I said, is Elon here? And he said, yeah. I said, can I meet with him? And he's like, well, first of all, his calendar's booked like months in advance. And we don't just let anyone want to meet with him. And I was like, okay, cool. But like, can I meet with him? Because I think he might find it funny that like I sent 76 emails and I'm here today. And there must have been something innocent about my face. I swear, I don't know what it was, but he looks at me and he's like, you know what? All right, let me just take you to his office.
This crazy guy is naive enough to ask this question. Yeah. We'll show him.
I was like, F it, just do it, right? And so I do it. He takes me to his office and he's like, look, the only thing I got to ask you is you cannot like fan out. Like, don't be a fan. He doesn't like that kind of stuff, and he doesn't tolerate it. And I was like, yeah, of course. No worries. I'll be professional. I used to wear like suits back then, and so he takes me to his office and he's like, hey, Elon, this is Gaurav. He's with TrueBridge. He's the one that sent all those staffing emails. And the first thing that comes out of my mouth on accident, because I actually got so nervous, was, oh my God, thank you so much for meeting with me. I'm such a big fan of yours. Literally, I did the thing the guy just told me not to do, is fan out. And then I accidentally said the F word because I got so nervous. And then the other guy, the director of HR, was like looking down, like, oh my God,
what did I just do?
Yeah. But anyway, we were both so embarrassed. Elon decides he's like, look, I have 10 minutes. You want to have a quick chat? You want a coffee? I was like, yeah, obviously,
Oh my gosh.
So I sit down with him. I don't get to ask a single question. All I get is bombarded with questions from Elon Musk. Where are you? Like, tell me about your background. How do you find candidates? What's your rate? How do you price things out? How do I know you're good at what you do? All these things, right? Like that I didn't expect to answer. But anyway, he says, look, and he was very much on on time. He's like, look, at the end of the 10 minutes, he said, if you do what you say you're capable of doing, excuse me, I'll give you the SpaceX account, Tesla account, and Solar City account. And I was like, whoa, you know, and I was like, yeah, I got you. I won't let you down. And I did not let him down. I mean, we spent whatever money we had left in the bank, hired some of the best recruiters that we could find, you know, and so that little thing, there was so many like breaks that we caught after that. And those breaks that we caught after that weren't really because of me, but that first one was so huge. And that little company that was down 750 something thousand 17 months in ended up growing to 72 million in revenue by the end of 2016. And then we got acquired. We had an exit, but got acquired by a management consulting firm at the end of 2016.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So that's how, that was kind of like
talk
break.
About 76 times. I mean, it is Elon Musk, but 76 times to one person when you're feeling like you've lost everything. I mean, 76 times you're like grasping for straws. You're like hoping and dreaming at that point. But what I think was really cool about that story is that like the universe served you, right? You were just trying to serve somebody else. You were not asking for something. You were not asking for, $70 million of top line revenue. You were just like, look, how can I help you? I know I'm not going to let you down. I'm going to serve you in any way I can. And you just kept leaning into that. I think that's such a amazing story. Yeah.
I think I had a lot to lose, kind of, because that same
you had everything
year,
to lose.
I met my wife. Well, at the time she was my girlfriend, who now today is my wife. She at the time was a school teacher in Southern California, clearly makes nothing, right? Sadly. And I wasn't making anything. And I know because she had told me that her family was saying things like, what are you doing with this guy? He hasn't he hasn't made it. What are you doing? And I was like, God, that actually hurts, right? And I remember there were days where I would like cry and I would say, why is this like, how much more am I supposed to take? Yeah. Like, when do I get my due? And now I look at it like, I was like, maybe like I was only 30 something.
Yeah. Still really young.
Yeah. And and that clicked. So this is what I mean, right? Like you and I talked just like 5 minutes ago. We were like, well, nowadays, like no one has, I feel like a lot of people don't have patience. They want everything so quickly because that's how the world's like portraying things to be. And then I'm like, well, I'd rather go through that grind because now I'm prepared for anything. I feel at least.
No, it's totally right. You feel like you have this level of resilience because you've gone through the worst thing.
Yeah.
For all intents and purposes, like your worst thing, right? Is that just feeling of failure or the fear of failure or
and FOMO and everything, anxiety, depression, whatever. All of the things are kind of mixed into one.
But entrepreneurship is supposed to be full of roses and sunshine and
that's right.
And abundance. What the hell are you talking about, Gaurav?
Seriously, dude.
There's no fear and anxiety and insecurity. What are you talking about?
Yeah, entrepreneurship the tagline should be entrepreneurship where, well, never mind. I was going to say where there is no you've made it.
Oh, that's so good.
You don't make
That's
it.
true, right?
You just keep going.
You just keep going.
Right?
There's really no destination.
Right.
Which then takes me to what you're doing now, which I think is an incredibly amazing business and really a noble business, but also like I know it gives you a ton of fulfillment. And I want you to explain a little bit about it, but basically what you're doing is you're reverse engineering employment. And you're kind of starting from people's place of what is your life? If you had to create your own life and design your own life, what does that look like? And then let's work backwards to find you the career or the job or the position or the salary or whatever to align with that life rather than, which often happens, is finding a job at the highest salary and stop.
And taking a job that you didn't want in the first place because you feel like you didn't have any options, right? The biggest mistake I think most people make in their careers is They just aimlessly kind of drift around, right? Like, I'll give you a real life example. Someone hates their job. They say, F it, I'm going to put together a resume and go and apply to hundreds of other jobs. Well, they never kind of mapped out where they want to go, why they want to go there, what are my strengths, what do I value, what am I good at? They're like, I just want to get so far away from this negative thing as quickly as I possibly can. And then they go out to the job world, go apply, go tell friends that I'm looking. And then they realize, like, damn, I'm not getting anybody to call me back, or I'm not seeing, they'll apply to hundreds of jobs, hardly hear back, or whatever. And then at some point they'll get an interview, and they most likely will bomb that interview because they haven't had enough practice. They put a lot of pressure on themselves. They get nervous. And so they do this for a little bit, and they finally land a job. They have no other option. So they're like, well, let me just take this job before because I don't have anything. And now they take that job, they do this for another 2 years, realize they hate it, and they do the whole thing again. They keep repeating that same cycle. So our goal, the company I started was CareerSprout, was like, let's break that cycle and teach people how to build a meaningful career. And just like your point, what a meaningful career to me is, the way I define it, is a career that supports the lifestyle that you want to have versus your life being a slave to your career. And that concept was one that I came across by an author named Hunter S. Thompson. Hunter S. Thompson he's the author who wrote Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. He was this extremely eccentric author. He even told the world, he like announced it. He said, hey, to the world, when I'm basically done with my life, I'm just going to kill myself. And he wasn't depressed or anything. He just said, when I'm done, I'm just going to kill myself. And then he did. But anyway, in the midst of that, he put out all this great work. And one of the things, this letter, you should type it. If you want to see this letter I'm talking about, just Google Hunter S. Thompson purpose. And it was a letter his friend wrote to him in the 50s. And his friend was like, how'd you define like the purpose of life? How did you do this? And he's like, well, the first thing I did was I did not ask somebody else how to define my purpose in life. You define it yourself. And then he said, the second thing I did was I knew that I wanted to first design the ideal life I wanted to have, no matter how audacious or how ambitious that was, and then find and build a career that supported that lifestyle, rather than swim aimlessly or, pursue these arbitrary career goals that most people have that don't come from any place of value or anything like that, intrinsic value, and just chase those goals. So I love that. I love that philosophy,
so
and right. And so that's kind of what we teach in this program, in our coaching program.
I mean, it's a big part of why I launched the podcast, because I think that we're in a time right now that not enough people are asking us this question about, there's two things you need to have, right? You need to have the ability to be diligent worker. You need to be a productive member of society. You need to be able to grind. You need to be able to add value. But you need to do it in a place that gives you purpose, and be able to ask the question, what is it that gives me purpose, and what fulfills me, and am I doing those things, and am I in alignment with those things? I think that is, part of why I love what you're doing, and a big part of why this entire community is why I launched it, and why we need to be having these conversations, because I think it's more important than anything right now. Why do you think people, besides the fact that they're potentially not trained to look properly, etc., but why do you think people right now are so impatient? What is it about society or the environment we're in right now that makes people jump every 1 or 2 years? Like, why are people so impatient? Or are they impatient, or is it something else?
I just don't think people take the time to figure out what they really want. So Tony Robbins says this thing like, where you end up in life has nothing to do with the situations you're in. It has everything to do with the decisions you make.
Yeah.
And people are not very intentional about the decisions they make. They're very reactive about them, and they react based on the situation they're in. So they're like, well, I joined this job and I hate it. Let me just leave.
Right.
And I don't have great pay, I don't have great mentors, I don't have great leaders, I'm going to leave. Right. And so everywhere they go, it's a lot of it. And I'm not trying to be this like old guy who's like, back in my day, because I was this person too at one point. But it's all about like, what can I get? What can I get? What can I get? What can they do for me? What can they do for me? And I do think earlier on, it benefits you to first just take a step back, and we're not taught this in school, so I don't blame anyone, but I do think we should take a step back and say, well, where do I see myself being most happiest, right? Based on what I value, based on what I think I'm good at, based on what kind of problems I enjoy solving, all of those things. Mm-hmm. So when I know those things, that's like, think of those as ingredients. I know, well, then based on those things, I would probably enjoy these jobs. And you need to be able to connect the dots or work with someone that can help you connect those dots. So then when you're in those jobs and you're earlier in your career, you should think of your career in two ways, right? Like there's two frameworks. So like in the beginning, it's not about you. It's about everything is about what can I get this company, what can I help this company achieve or this person achieve or this, whatever. And I don't care if I'm underpaid. I don't care if I have the best title. I'm just going to use the early part of my career to achieve as much as I possibly can and learn as much as I possibly can.
Okay, now hold on right there, because that is that was a huge knowledge drop, because I think people assume, and now especially in this generation, that access to information is available immediately. We're in this like instant gratification ecosystem. The fact that you identified that early on in your career, it's all about what I have to give more than I get. Mm-hmm. I have to show up early. Salary doesn't matter. I have to overwork. I have to add value to my boss or my team or my company. Explain why that's so important to people, because I think people underestimate the importance of that. And I'm not talking to everybody, really people that are earlier on their careers, younger in their careers. And I was pretty fortunate to be surrounded with people that understood that and reminded me of that all the time. And I also wasn't money driven, although money's important, but I wasn't incredibly financially driven. Otherwise I would have, skipped town long time ago. But I think being focused on keeping your head down and focused on adding value early on in your career is probably the single best advice you could ever give to somebody in a 30, 40 year career. You skip that phase and you build that routine the wrong way, I think you're set to fail. But give me some insight on that.
Okay, so in our program, one thing we preach, the framework that we use, that one of them is, it's called the career progression life cycle.
Okay.
And so think of it like this: in the corporate world, not entrepreneurship, but in the corporate world, there's three stages to everyone's life cycle. The first stage is what we call learning. And that's the stage I just described, where like in your early 20s, you're just focused on learning as much as you possibly can, learning, racking up some achievements, whatever, right? Again, it's not about title, not about pay, doesn't matter. It's not about you.
Not about you.
And then typically what happens in the second part of your career, like, so think of this as like your early 30s, mid 30s into your like early 40s, you go from learning, and if you've done it right, you go to earning. Stage 2 is called earning. And so at this stage, you've capitalized on everything you just learned and achieved. And now you start entering the early parts of leadership, right? And if you do this right, you're becoming a good leader. You're understanding now how to help other people learn and how to help them do well. And the more of this you do, the better output of work you deliver. Mm-hmm. So the better output of work you deliver, the more opportunities come your way, right? Mm-hmm. Naturally. And the more valuable you become. So the more valuable you become, the more options you have. Simple as that. So then in stage 2, towards the end of stage 2, if done right again, you go from earning into the last stage of your career, which is called steering. And now you're literally steering an organization in the direction that aligns with its mission, its vision, its values. And you're doing this in the capacity of a senior leader, potentially even C-level if you make it that far, right? And so I always say this, I was like, if you go to any big company and you see 40 or 50-year-olds being managed by like a 30-year-old, the problem is that those 40 or 50-year-olds, they didn't go through the life cycle fast enough because they didn't understand this framework, right? And now they're pegged or deemed as somebody who's not cut out for leadership. And that's not the truth. It's not that they're not cut out for it. They just never had the opportunity. They were never trained. Maybe they didn't understand this framework, whatever, right?
Right.
And now some 30-year-old comes in on, and the organization's going to say, let's put our bets on this person. And now this person's overseeing this 40 or 50-year-old. So the importance of going through this life cycle is so that you keep moving upwards, achieving not just money, but more importantly, growth. And then the more you grow, the more valuable you become, the more options you have available to you. And then that's when you get to pick and choose which option you want to go with, which then to me is the definition of success. I tell people all the time, you don't have to be a senior leader. You don't have to be a C-level executive. You don't have to be a VP. But so long as you have the option to do it, you'll always feel great. You don't want to regret not having that, not being able to get there.
So, post-COVID environment, a lot of moving parts in the employment ecosystem right now.
Yeah.
Give me a little bit of background about where you see us as a workforce, as a job force, like right now, this moment. And what advice do you have for employers or entrepreneurs or people who are trying to either keep or find really great talent, which most businesses are all about people. And so you can make the best widget, but if you don't have really great people, like, we're all useless. So I'm sure a lot of people have that on their mind. Like, how do I navigate the current employment ecosystem and how do I succeed? So give us raw feedback, like what's really going on, how can we have an unfair advantage?
So I own a staffing agency too. And so the perspective I'm about to give you comes from me coaching people directly to help them and then seeing what companies are going through as well. And I think today, August 26, 2021 is probably one of the best times you're going to have in a long time to go and find a job. So if you're a job seeker, you get to cash in right now. And here's why. So if you think about the 2008 crash, right? 2008, 2009, the financial crash, the housing crash or whatever. Everyone and their moms went out of work, tons of people. And so whatever very few jobs that there were, everyone had to fight for those, right? So when that's the case, when supply is high and demand is low, supply is low and demand is high, it becomes an employer-driven market, meaning employers get to dictate the terms of everything. And this is when people they lowballed people. They could pay them really low salaries because you have to take it.
Right.
Okay. And then along, right around like 2013, 2014, 2015, like this is when things started getting healthy. And then there was sort of like this, kind of like this equilibrium. There were enough people in the market, enough jobs, and everyone was just growing and it was healthy. And then all of a sudden last year, 2020, we had the global pandemic. And everyone hits the panic button. Employers, humans, right? And so they lay off 20 million people fast around the world, or within the US, way more around the world. So now there's all these people out of work. Fast forward now to today, present day. Companies are like, well, I think things are going back to normal. We were still doing well during the pandemic. We were making good money. We didn't lose that much. Stock market was really great, right? So they're like, let's just hire again. Well, all of a sudden, there's 10.3 million jobs out there in the US, right? And then there's maybe like 7.2 million workers, something like that. So now
there's a gap.
The supply is extremely high, or the demand is extremely high and the supply is really low. And this time, if you're a job seeker, you can pick and choose whichever company you want to go to. So here's what I'm seeing realistically, and here's how that works out. Company comes to us, they say, we want a product manager. I can say, okay, well, there's like 30,000 companies out there looking for really high product managers. There's only like 5,000 qualified product managers out there. So if the product manager gets an offer from that company, the company's going to say, what are you looking for? That product manager, when they normally would have got paid 130, can now easily say 180. We just had someone go through our program just this week, go from 165,000 to 425,000 because she was just the best darn revenue, like, she was head of sales in her company. And so she could have picked and choose where she wanted to go, and everyone wanted her. So she told the companies that she was interviewing with, look, I'm interviewing with 8 other companies. They're all willing to pay over 230, 300, whatever. And she was making that up. No one knows. And then the one that made her an offer said, all right, let's just go to like above 4.
Well, let's qualify, because that's in tech, right? If you're
that's in tech.
If you're
in tech.
if you're like in a lot of industries, that kind of jump probably does not exist. But in tech,
no, it doesn't.
There was an alignment there.
But you could still realistically make $10, $15, $20, $30,000 more than what you're making today in any industry.
Well, what's the advice to employers who are like trying to navigate that, where that's the environment? You want to keep really great people. You want to retain really great people. We talk about that in our Visage group all the time. What advice do you have for them?
Yeah, around retention, it's like, take the time to learn what your people want. And most of the time what they want is growth, consistent feedback, recognition, right? If you're giving somebody an opportunity for growth consistently, chances are they're going to stay, and pay them fair market value. Don't be cheap. If you're like a $500 million company and someone wants $20,000 more, just pay them the $20,000 more.
Right.
If they add the value and all that. But I think to retain good people in today's workforce, you have to be flexible. You have to give and take, right? If they want to work remote, let them work remote if it makes sense for that job. But really give them the opportunities for growth, give them consistent feedback, and recognition, I think, is another big piece that was missing back in the day. That's, I think, coming around. And then there's all this other stuff that I'm not even going to get into around like diversity and inclusion, and
Sure.
the gender wage gap, all that needs to be there too.
It's funny how I wonder how many employers operate from a position of fear that they're going to lose their people all the time.
Oh yeah, I don't know. That's a good question.
I mean, I know
employees
sorry,
operate
go ahead.
from that.
Isn't that funny? I wonder, I mean, as an employer, like, no, I don't have this position right now because I think we've definitely pivoted to having these conversations much more transparently with our teams about, what are you looking for? How do you get the right career path? How do we give you growth? How do we give you more responsibility, more, all that stuff, and building a culture around that. But I know in the very beginning, when we were starting our businesses, it's very easy to get into a position of fear that, oh my God, like what happens if I lose that person? Everything's going to fall apart. But you really start to build a business that is beyond just a handful of people or one person, right? And it becomes an ecosystem. But now you're telling me that the employees operate that from that place. So there's an opportunity for employees and employers, especially now today, to have much more transparent communication about what's in it for me, right? The WIFM, what's in it for me, what's in it for you, why are we doing what we're doing? We just had a conversation with one of our consultants and our key leadership. It's like, keep reiterating vision, mission, values, keep reminding people what's in it for them as this whole transition happens. Any thoughts on that?
I feel like you literally just hit it on the head. That transparent, that open communication, I don't think was always prevalent in the workforce. I think it's getting there because, again, like, I think something great is happening with this younger generation, the new, whatever they are, Gen Z, right? They're just a little bit more audacious. They say what they want, and if they don't get what they want, they'll leave. So that part, they need to improve their patience and all that stuff that we talked about. But I do think what they're doing is they're being very vocal about the things that matter, not just to them, but to human beings in general. And it's forcing employers to have these conversations that you just talked about. And that's really good because that's what, breaks barriers and shatters glass ceilings and all of these things, right?
Absolutely.
Women are speaking out, people of color are speaking out, and we didn't have that in the past. And now we're seeing that. And I think that's great that we're having that. And it's only going to make the workforce better, but I'm sure there's a lot more work to do around that, But yeah, it is that open, transparent communication that you just said.
It's so good. What keeps you up at night right now?
Well, that's a good question.
Although you got a nice Buddha behind you there, you're like, you're a very peaceful, centered guy, but still, what, as you're dealing with all the things you're dealing with, as you're growing your company, serving employees, what are the things that keep you up at night? What are the things you're toiling over?
I think what everyone goes through sometimes. I'm not any different from anyone else, but like, okay, what more could I be doing? Right? Did I spend my day effectively? Oh, I wasted time dealing with that, or this thing pissed me off and I shouldn't have even got pissed off about it. There's not a one thing that keeps me up, but like there are times where I keep asking myself, what more can I do? And I have to remind myself, like, damn, I've already come far enough. It's, again, just take your time. This is not a race. I'm not, like, I'm literally not competing with anyone. I have competitors.
Why do we ask ourselves that question?
What can we do? I don't know.
Why do we ask ourselves that question?
Because we're crazy, man. We're just crazy. I think entrepreneurs are crazy. We have to remind ourselves to just slow down. Right?
Oh, yeah. It's a big problem.
Yeah.
We don't know how to be still.
You just called me like 2 weeks ago and you're like, what if we do this business thing? Remember?
I know.
We don't need to get in. I was like, yeah.
We don't know. We don't know how to sit still.
I know. We're like, wait, we both have our own businesses. Let's like make
you already
sure
have a business. You're married. You got 2 little babies, and you want to go do what? I know it's a chronic problem, but it keeps it exciting and it keeps it fun. And there needs to be guys like you who push the comfort zone and drive things forward and continue to build vision for other people to follow. So. That's what it's all about.
Guys like anyone who's doing that could follow them. But yeah, I appreciate that.
Well, as we wrap up, do you have anything else you want to share or ask or share with the audience? I really appreciate you doing this, by the way.
What keeps you up at night?
Oh, man. Well, definitely the same thing. Like, am I doing enough? And I've definitely gone through the, like, am I doing enough? Meaning, am I doing the right things? Am I spending time on the right things? Am I adding value in the right way? And I don't think I learned that until just a couple of years ago, to be honest. I think...
How did you learn that?
Well, that's the whole premise of the show, is that I think, chasing some destination and looking for wealth or richness or fulfillment or satisfaction or peace or joy, you name it, is not defined how we are conventionally are taught and raised and how society defines it for us. So I think when I achieved a certain level in my life, I realized like, oof, I need to step back and I need to rethink everything. And I think that's real. I think that's a real journey a lot of people go through. And it's something that I wanted to crack open with people. Are you asking the right questions to yourself? Because you're really not chasing success for somebody else, right? You said it yourself. It's like no one else is asking you that question, right?
Yeah.
And there's societies and there's communities, especially in our Indian community, and everyone's got judgments and opinions. And then you go social and people have even more opinions and judgments, right? It's like, what are they doing? Well, but it's really a fascinating journey to get to a certain destination, whatever your destination is, and then realize like, oh man, that's not satisfying at all. That wasn't fulfilling at all. And so stepping back and redefining that is sort of, I think that's the journey that everybody's on. And it evolves. It changes as you go through journeys, right? I loved how you said in the very beginning about projects and why you're able to, like what freedom is being able to work on projects that I want to work on. Right now, I want to work on my business. Right now, I want to work on being a great husband, or I want to work on, myself, or my emotional intelligence, or my connection with my kids, or whatever it is. And whether you have that freedom or not, I mean, that's a choice you can make even now. You could have a W-2 job, have a 50-hour work week and still make some of those choices.
Mm-hmm.
Am I wrong?
I agree. No, I agree.
But they're choices, and you have to be aware of it and make the choice.
Yeah. I think you got to know we talked about like there is no end goal, because it just keeps moving. But where is the place you're trying to go in general? And then once you get there, you can define the next thing. And like, I'll tell you, for me, I am a very, very lazy person by nature. And I just choose not to be lazy because I have like that saying like make hay while the sun keeps shining. I was like, well, I'm still 38. I'm not that old. I have 2 little kids. I have a lot of time to do these things to build, generational wealth, hopefully. But I know that my end goal is at some point I'm going to hang all this up. I'm going to buy a coffee shop. I'm going to get fat and I'm just going to call it a day. But I don't know when that is.
Well, hopefully you buy a coffee shop and you don't get fat so you can enjoy 20 years of your coffee shop. But
yeah, but
I'm going to be your first customer at your coffee shop
and stuff. But yeah, no, you're right. You'll be my first customer. But by get fat, I mean like I just want to eat pizza all the time, candy all the time, things like that. But I don't do that now because I know that'll destroy my.
That's a really good story, by the way, bro. That's a really good story.
It's the truth, but that's my end goal. Just call it, get fat, and call it a day.
Well, with that, I think we'll close. But I really appreciate your time, my friend, and thanks for all these knowledge drops. And we'll talk soon.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Rich Equation Podcast with Ashish Nathu. Do you want more ideas on how to live rich? Go to richequationpodcast.com for show notes and resources. Then take 1 minute to leave Ashish a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And we'll see you on the next episode.
Care.